think of students as perhaps being a bit more of a burden than a benefit to them in their organization. But I think you'll see with this success story that I'll talk about that they were very valuable to that organization, and hopefully you'll get some ideas on how you might be able to bring some students into your workplace. There's a lot of supports out there to help. ICTC definitely has a program that is out there, our WIL Digital Wage Subsidy Program. I'll talk about that. Margaret is here from Labour and Advanced Education, and she'll talk about some of the great provincial wage subsidies that are out there, both to support students and also to support recent graduates, which I think is very important. And then we're also going to have Shelley to talk about how does a business in the Valley connect with Acadia? How do you find a great Acadia student to join you and work with you? What's the process? So I think that's another important aspect of it. So let's get going. So first, a little bit about ICTC. Many of you may not have heard about us, but we are a not-for-profit organization headquartered in Ottawa, and we've been around for about 26 odd years. But most recently, in the mid-2000s, we became the not-for-profit organization. We do a lot of work in the labor market analysis. You can see over here, I've just got a sample of some recent documents that we put together. You can go visit our website and take a look. But one of the big things that we do is we have some capacity building and innovation programs, and our WIL Digital program is actually one of those programs. And so I want to talk about a success that I think you'll find is quite eye-opening. Open Ocean Robotics, they're actually a West Coast company based in Victoria, and they were a startup back in 2018. And, oh, excuse me for a second. Back in 2018, and what they did is that they were working out of their garage, and they wanted to get some help with a certain aspect of their project. And they create autonomous or driverless ocean vehicles. You can see one up there in the picture. And they were running into a roadblock and they needed some help. But of course, being a startup, they didn't have a lot of cash flow to help them with that. And so they went looking for some student talent. They went to the University of Victoria, found a couple of great engineering co-op students. And with ICTC support, along with provincial support, they were able to bring those students into their organization for a work term, and they continued with more work terms after that. And as you can see from the graphics that I have up here, they became from a startup in, this is Judy Angus over here, she's the CEO. So from a startup in Judy and Colin's garage to being a very successful company. And one of the interesting things that I'd like to point out is that two people, this is their list of who's on their team, two people in this list are actually the students that helped them. So this gentleman down here, he was one of the students, and now he is a fully fledged member of their organization, a full-time employee. And then this gentleman down here, as you can see, he's still an undergraduate student in electrical engineering. But what a great way for an organization to really get a sense of who's going to be a good fit when they do graduate. So Open Ocean Robotics, a great success story leveraging both our funding and provincial funding. So I wanted to tell you, to share that with you because, as I said, it is a program that can really help you to grow your business or to perhaps expand into areas that you hadn't expanded into before. And the program is actually funded by the federal government. So there is an initiative called the Student Work Placement Program, and that is that's where the funds come from to support us. And not only, and I'm sorry, I seem to have a little bit of technical issue here with the screen jumping around a little bit. So just bear with me as we go through this. But in terms of the Student Work Placement Program, if you hear that term SWPP, that's where that comes from. And there are a number of funding partners that channel the federal money into different segments of the, I guess, business ecosystem. So ICTC has a very broad mandate of finding student placements that are relevant to the digital economy, and that's pretty broad. Whereas some of the other organizations have a very narrow focus. as you can see on this list here, but our focus is quite broad, and we're able to fund a wide range of positions, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. So before I do that, I just thought it would be interesting to take a look at what kind of support have we been able to provide this past summer to students and businesses in the Valley. So I took a look in our system, and we actually were able to provide support for 22 Acadia students this summer. And you can see that the geographical area, much of the support is for businesses that are actually in Nova Scotia, some of them in the Valley, some in Halifax, and a few were out in Ontario. We have a good partner down there, Deloitte. They do take on quite a lot of students in different roles. And also this year, we were able to provide funding directly to universities. And so Acadia was able to take advantage of some of that funding as well, to have some students help them with some projects internally. And I thought it would also be very helpful to share what one local employer is saying about the student that he was able to bring on board. And I think just read that. I don't have to read it for you, but Brian Murray over at Reach Boarding in Windsor was very impressed with the student that he had working for him. And I think that is, I have spoken with a number of employers over the past couple of months, and without exception, they're all extremely impressed with the quality and the level of talent that's coming into their businesses from both Acadia students and for the student population in Nova Scotia in general. So I think it really is a testament to the skills that those students can bring to the table. So you might be wondering, well, how does a business or a not-for-profit qualify for one of our wage subsidies? And I'll talk a bit more about what that is in a moment. But effectively, all you need to do is bring on a student for a work term in a position that is relevant to the digital economy. And as I said, that's a pretty broad spectrum of roles that student could be taking. But I think it's important also, particularly in these times, to look at, and I've bolded them, but some of the interesting roles that we can fund today are in business development, digital marketing, or technical sales. And digital marketing has been a very popular role for students. As you can imagine, many of them are extremely good at social media and preparing things for content that would be put up on a website. So they've been employed in a number of organizations to help with that digital marketing strategy. So that's something to keep in mind, is that we're not just talking about the more traditional IT roles of software development or app development, that sort of thing, although those, of course, are definitely highly fundable. So speaking of those traditional roles, so if you're wondering about that, well, yeah, absolutely. So someone who's doing software development work, or maybe they're doing game design work. We have a number of game development companies here in Nova Scotia. Maybe they're creating apps. They're doing those more traditional IT roles. Definitely very fundable by us. Engineering co-op roles are also very fundable. And as I mentioned earlier in that success story with Open Ocean Robotics, Julie Angus brought on some electrical engineering students to help them. And we've seen, what I did, just so you know where these roles came from, I looked in this year's series of applications that we have funded. And so these are roles that ICTC has funded this year across the country. But definitely engineering roles are very relevant. But I wanted to show you these other digital tech roles that are non-traditional. And if you can take a look at some of those roles up there, as I mentioned earlier, the digital marketing roles certainly are very relevant. But here's some other ones, like somebody was a tax analyst, somebody was managing digital contracts, someone was doing housing data research. So all of these roles had, they had some technical digital economy aspects to them. And so what I thought would be interesting is to, again, going into our system and looking at what are some of those digital skills that people are actually learning or the students are working on or learning when they're in the place of business. So these are some of the skills over and above the traditional, you know, I'm writing Python code or I'm doing web development or something like that. But these are non-traditional roles. So somebody was basically just analyzing data. So they're using tools to look at data and drawing conclusions out of that. Someone else was doing research and practicing their research skills, working with financial software packages, certainly a very good digital economy skill, helping with payroll calculations, and another certainly digital tech and digital economy skill. So what I'm hoping is that by looking at these different digital economy skills, you're starting to get a sense that when you're looking at how students might be able to help you and how you will be able to get funding for those students, that there's a wide range of roles outside of the normal digital economy that you might be thinking of that will be perhaps highly relevant to your organization. So let's think now. Hopefully I've got your excitement about, yeah, these students can actually add some value to my organization, to my business. So let's talk about what those subsidies are. So ICTC subsidy is now, the federal government has increased it from where it was before, and you can see what that was previously, we are now able to cover 75% of the wages that you would pay to a student for their work term up to $7,500. Which I think is pretty significant. Previously, we were able to cover 70% up to 7,000 for underrepresented students, and then 50% up to 5,000 for all others. But because of our current COVID situation, then we've got a much richer subsidy that we can bring to the table. And then Margaret is going to talk a little later on about some of those great provincial subsidies. And this year, we're actually able to work together with the province to combine both our funding program together with the co-op education program, if you're able to qualify for that, which can make it extremely cost effective to bring on students into the workplace. So let's talk a little bit about employer eligibility. So what do you as an employer need to do to make sure that you are eligible? Well, a very basic requirement is that you need to be registered as a business or a not-for-profit in Nova Scotia, or in Canada, I should say, obviously here in Nova Scotia. So this year, and what I've done is on my slide here, you'll see a couple of things that were, oops, excuse me. Not sure why we're having this trouble, but I do apologize. Specifically here for this fiscal year, we've been able to, again, provide funding directly to a post-secondary, whereas previously it was really more oriented towards businesses and not-for-profit organizations. You do need to be able to offer a safe work environment, which today often means that someone is working from home. And you do, I guess one of the big requirements is take them on as an employee, not as a contractor. So you can visit our website and get full details of there's a couple of other requirements there, but these are the key ones for you to be aware of. And then in terms of the position, well, as I mentioned, they need to be relevant to the digital economy, and that's pretty broad, and we've talked about that already. But the interesting thing for our program is that unlike a co-op, the co-op program, which is a full-time program, and we can definitely work with co-op students, and we love doing that, but we can work with full or part-time positions that, that you may have. So a great example is that this summer, many organizations, whether they were not-for-profits or for-profit businesses, they were taking on students to help them, as I mentioned earlier, with their digital marketing campaigns. Now that's great when they're there full-time in the summer, but now those students are going back to their fall studies. Many businesses want to keep them on a part-time basis, and many students love having that extra income and extra learning experience. And so we're actually able to support a part-time role as well as a full-time role, which I think is great flexibility. So you do need to be able to offer that meaningful work integrated learning or WIL opportunity. That is important, but for us, it doesn't have to be related back to the academic requirements, whereas that certainly would be the case if you were bringing on a co-op student. And I guess one key here is that we don't want you to be taking on students to replace staff that you had to, that you weren't able to keep on. So that's one of the requirements that our funder, which is the federal government, has. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of additional flexibilities because of COVID, and we are definitely able to support either office or based roles or remote roles. And that will be through the end of this current fiscal year, which ends for the federal government in March 31st. And we're still waiting to find out if they're going to be extending that new flexibility or not. And certainly there's a lot of lobbying going on by many groups, including ourselves, to make sure that we can continue offering with those remote roles. I think we've demonstrated now that that works very effectively. And I won't dwell much time on this net new requirement, just to say that this year it's not relevant. Next year it may be relevant, in fact, and then we will have a fuller discussion on that if we need to. So in terms of student eligibility, so we're able to provide funding for students that are registered in a Canadian post-secondary institution. So, and a publicly funded Canadian post-secondary institution. So a private college, we unfortunately would not be able to support those students, but for all the universities in the province and outside the province, of course, the colleges, NSCC, those students are definitely eligible for our funding. Now, we do ask that, well, our funding guidelines, again, require the student to be enrolled full-time or part-time. They can be in any level, so they could be college, undergrad, they could be a PhD student, a master's student. And in terms of the background of the student, we're definitely not limited to people that are in a technology background. So here's a couple of great examples. I had a Bridgewater company, a plumbing and heating company, so not your traditional high-tech company, that wanted to know if they would be eligible for a student to work with them in their back office because they were digitizing their records and they were putting in a small enterprise resource planning system, like an accounting type system. And so absolutely, that role, even though the company isn't a high-tech company or a technology-based company, the role definitely was, and it would qualify. So that's a great example of a company that wouldn't fit your normal mold. And then in terms of a student background, I had a student that was in a journalism program with a minor in human rights that was able to find a position with a company as a digital marketing role. So again, non-traditional tech background, journalism and human rights, but working in a digital economy role. So I think that that should give you a good example or a good idea of the breadth of our program, how flexible we are. Now, in terms of the students themselves, we are unable to provide support to international students. That is a constraint that's imposed on us by the federal government. All of the SWPP partners would love to be able to support international students, but we're not. So students need to be Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or refugees. And if they fall into those categories and they're entitled to work in Canada, then we're able to provide funding to them. Margaret will talk a little bit about what the province is able to do for international students as we move on to her session. And the other thing to keep in mind is that whereas some of the programs that are out there have an age limit of 29 or 30, there is no age limit to our program. So we could fund a mature student going back to get a master's or deciding that they were going to go back to NSCC. I had an educator with 15 years experience go back to NSCC to reskill themselves as a web developer. So that person, if you brought them on, even though they might have been a first-year student in NSCC, they had a wealth of experience and background that they brought to the table. So again, hopefully you'll see that that program is pretty broad and pretty flexible. So we've talked about the eligibility for the role, the eligibility for the business, and the eligibility for the student. So assuming that we've got all those things in place, how do you go about applying for our wage subsidy? So what you would do is that you would go and visit us. You either type in will.digital into your browser window, the URL window, or go to this website. And that will take you to the landing page for our work integrated learning wage subsidy. You can find out more information about the subsidy. There's an employer handbook and so forth. But what you would do is that you would then click on the Apply Now button. And that will bring up either a sign-on screen if you already have set up your account, or if this is the first time you've visited this page and you want to set up an account, then you would go and click on the sign up button. And that will then take you to a page where you'll be asked to put in your business information, so business registration number or your not-for-profit registration number. Then tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how many employees you have, and that sort of thing. You only ever do that once. And then we'll ask you to identify some information about the position that you have available, that you have open up. We'll ask you to cut and paste in a position description. But one key that we're going to ask you to do is to identify those digital economy skills, 3 skills that the student would be working on during the placement. And that's why it's important that you, when you're thinking about putting together your position description, so just make sure that the focus is on the digital economy. So I had one applicant who had a very highly fundable digital marketing role, but when they wrote the position description, there was no reference to the fact that it was going to be working in a digital environment, that they were going to be using a software platform like Hootsuite or what have you to actually push things out to social media. So all we had to do was just go back in and insert the word digital a few times and put in a couple of those packages that they would be using, and then everything was fine. So when you're doing that, just surface those 3 digital economy skills. And then as you'll see, and I give you an example here, that you can have as many submissions as you want. Now, there is a finite amount of funding that's available. This year, ICTC had about 5,000 placements nationally, and we have about half of those committed at this point in time, with people expressing intent to use more, of course. However, at this point, we have a significant amount of funding that's available. So if you as a business want 1 student, that's great. That would be fantastic. If you came and said, you know, Tim, we can use 3 or 4, then just go ahead and create as many applications as you need. Here, you can see that, that this particular account has 4 applications that are underway. But again, it wouldn't be unusual for an organization to have more, and it certainly isn't unusual for an organization to have only 1 or 2. So it's entirely what works for yourself. So in terms of the process, again, as I said, you put in the information, ultimately you find a student, we reach out to the student, they upload their information. We then come back to you and say, are you happy with everything? You say yes, submit it for review. Once we've done our assessment, assuming that everything meets the eligibility requirements, as I said, are very broad, then you enter into a contract with us where you agree to do what you said you would do. You create a short learning plan, and there's a template for that. We do a check-in about the midpoint. We want you to let us know how things are going, and the student does the same thing. And then toward the end of the work term, within the last 2 weeks, we ask both the employer and the student to do a final check-in. Just to make sure that you as an employer were satisfied and happy with what you got, and that the student also felt that there was a valuable work integrated learning experience. And if you recall that quote that I put up from the gentleman from Reach Boarding in Windsor, that quote was what he put, and I spoke with him yesterday just to be sure that he was fine with me using, referencing him as his organization. But that's what he put into his final evaluation area, where you're able to give us a bit more detail about how you found the experience. So clearly, he felt it was a very worthwhile experience. You then upload your payroll records, and oh, by the way, because of COVID-19, we're also able at the midpoint, you can upload 8 weeks worth of payroll records, and then we can give you 50% payout on the wage subsidy. And then at the end of the work term, then you upload the payroll records again, just to demonstrate what you paid, and the subsidy is based on 75% up to $7,500 of the wages that you paid out to that person. So once again, just looking at the our wage subsidy program. So without a subsidy, typically students would get paid in the $15 to $20 an hour range. I mean, our requirement is that they get paid at least minimum wage. But based on their experience and what we're seeing is anywhere $14, $15 to $20, something like that. So without a subsidy, it can be a fairly substantial investment for a small business. But with our wage subsidy, then we are able to bring that down, I think, to a much more manageable place. And then Margaret's going to talk about the provincial subsidies, which are able to be combined this year with and into the winter with ours. And if you're able to qualify for for the CEI funding that Margaret will talk about, then that can make it a very cost-effective way to bring on a student into your organization and hopefully have some good value. So thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, Margaret and Shelley and myself will be happy to answer them at the end of the event. You can also reach out to me. I did post my contact email address in the chat, but please feel free to reach out to me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions later, you can certainly ask me. But I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand off to Margaret.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here, so bear with me for one moment while it pops up. Okay. So I work with the province, with the Department of Labor and Advanced Education, and we have a couple of wage subsidy programs that make it easier for employers to hire post-secondary young people in Nova Scotia. So that could be a co-op student, it could be somebody for a summer job, or it could be a recent graduate who's looking to stay and work in Nova Scotia. So the one that I'm going to spend the most time talking about is the co-op program because it connects very much to what Tim has been speaking about. And I know many of you are here to learn about the stacking opportunity that we've developed as a response to the financial strain that COVID-19 and the pandemic has created for a lot of businesses. So if you're thinking of taking on a co-op student, it's kind of a three-step process. And you do those three things at the same time, around the same time. And one of them is, reaching out to a university co-op office and advertising the job posting that you're looking to fill with a co-op student. So Shelley with Acadia is going to talk a little bit more about that. The other two steps would be coming and applying for provincial co-op funding, which is our program. And then the third thing will be applying for funding under a SWPP partner. So that's what Tim was talking about in terms of ICTC. You can come and apply for each of our programs, and we're working together on the back end to make sure that you get either 90% or 100% of that co-op student's wage covered. So typically what you get from us is $7.50 an hour as long as you're paying that co-op student $15 an hour, but we've changed things. And so if you do stack with ICTC funding or Venture for Canada funding or with another SWPP partner, you'll get actually 90% of the student's wage covered when you combine our funds. You can actually get closer to 100% if that student identifies with a designated diversity group. So that means they could be African Nova Scotian, Indigenous Mi'kmaq, a student living with a disability, a female working in an underrepresented occupation like a female engineer, or an international student. Unfortunately, the federal program doesn't support international students, so the province is able to take on their wages entirely. So if you are hiring an international student, you don't have to apply for a federal partner, you just apply with us and you'll get close to 100%. So I know many of you are starting to plan for the upcoming winter, and typically co-op placements take place 3 times a year: the fall, the winter, and the summer. And so starting at the beginning of this summer, we began to offer this arrangement of stacking for the summer term, the fall term, and we're going to continue that into the winter term. So right now, our application portal is open for accepting applications for jobs starting in January, and that'll close on September 16th. However, that is subject to change. Right now, technically, our fall co-op portal is closed. However, we've had some employers who've had to cancel their co-op agreements. Perhaps their company is still closed as a result of COVID. And so because of that, we have a little bit more wiggle room and we're able to accept a few more fall applications. So if you are looking at taking on a student for this fall, you technically can apply, and we will assess and look at that application because we might have some wiggle room for this fall. So that's the co-op program. If you have any questions about how to apply, please get in touch with me. One of the first things that you'll be prompted to do is create an employer profile on LAMPS. That's our online application portal for any provincial government program. I noticed that there's a lot of employer engagement specialists on this call that work at Nova Scotia Work Centres. They can help you access LAMPS and apply for LAMPS, so can I. And then once you're in there, you'll be able to find this program to apply for. So I did quickly just want to mention two other programs that are available for hiring recent graduates. If you're planning on hiring someone who's just finished college, private college, university, and you want to take them on full time, you can get some of their salary subsidized by us as well. You can get 25% of their first year salary, 35% if they're a member of an underrepresented group, and 12.5% of the second year salary. This is for any employer that's a small business under 100 full-time staff, any startup, any nonprofit, charity. As long as that grad graduated in the last 12 months, they're eligible to be hired with this program. They can be an international grad as long as they have a working visa. They don't have to be a permanent resident to be hired with this program. And it could also be someone from outside of Nova Scotia. If they graduated in Alberta or Scotland, but they want to live and work in Nova Scotia, they can be hired with this as well. So we've had over 1,000 grads hired with this program in the last 5 years. Some of these photos are actually grads who've been hired in the Valley region, but we have success stories across the province. And a third program I'm going to mention is Innovate to Opportunity, which is kind of the cousin program to Graduate to Opportunity. And you can actually get a 3-year salary subsidy for hiring someone with a job focused on innovation and product development that could help your company expand its export potential. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I'm going to encourage you to reach out to me one-on-one if you want to walk through these programs and see what might be the best fit for you. But with those two graduate hiring programs, we are offering some flexibilities because of the challenges that COVID-19 has created. So I'm just going to exit out and stop sharing my screen. And I know that there's some questions in the chat, so I'm going to address those in the chat and allow Shelley to start her presentation about the Acadia University Co-op office. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm just going to get my presentation up and running here. I'm just going to share my screen and find my presentation. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today to provide you with an introduction to Acadia's cooperative education program and to tell you more about how it could help you with filling your organization's staffing requirements. So there's just a quote here on the first page, and it's from a small business owner in Nova Scotia. She says that we're a small business with an intimate team. Therefore, co-op students take on big projects and make a huge impact within our organization. We look forward to welcoming more Acadia co-op students in the future. So I think that's quite a testament to the power of what students can do for your organization. So I'm just going to briefly tell you what co-op is, explain the hiring process to you from Acadia's perspective, talk to you a little bit about employer responsibilities because people always want to know what they're getting into, and just give you a little bit more information on funding programs. So first of all, co-op is an academic program which combines classroom studies and work experience. Students have an opportunity to gain hand-on paid experience in a position related to their field of study so that by the time they graduate, they have a year's worth of work experience. So at Acadia, co-op has a 38-year history. We started with computer science in '82, And most recently in 2016, Community Development and Women and Gender Studies came on. So we have co-op in almost all of the programs at Acadia: business, arts, sciences, some of the master's programs, computer science, and those other two programs that I just mentioned, community development and women and gender studies. So to qualify for credit, co-op must be discipline related. So it has to be related to a student's degree. It has to be at least 12 weeks in duration. It has to be a minimum of 35 hours per week. It has to be paid, and it has to be supervised. So as Margaret mentioned, students are available year-round. Work terms can begin in January, May, and September. Typically, they will be 4 months, 8 months, or if you have a longer opportunity available, they can also be an internship, which is 12 or 16 months. So at Acadia, students will do 3 4-month co-op work terms over the course of their degree. They'll do one in the summer after second year. They'll do one in the summer after third year, but they also will do one during a regular academic semester. And this would either be in the fall or winter term of their third or fourth year. And that really depends on their program of study. It is possible for a student's work term to extend into another work term with you. So if you hired a student in January, as an example, and you wanted to keep them on for the summer, that is absolutely possible. And right now we are currently accepting winter 2021 postings. The hiring process with Acadia is really easy, speedy, and direct. We're very employer-oriented, and we offer a very personalized experience. If you send us something, we're going to respond to you within 24 hours. In order to post a position with us, all you need to do is send us a job description, which details the responsibilities, or if you're comfortable, you can even self-post through the Acadia Co-op portal. You set the deadline for the posting. We can meet any turnaround time. So if you find out, if you decide today, for example, that you have an opportunity for the fall and you want to advertise that with us, we can do that with anywhere from a 2 to 5 day deadline if that's what you're looking for. We will advertise the posting for you. We will collect applications. We will package them and send them to you by email, so you don't have to worry about any of that labor work. There's no obligation to interview, and I think that's really important to know that if you look at the application package and you don't feel that the candidates meet your criteria, you do not have to interview anyone. But if you choose to, we also coordinate interviews, and if you're ready to make an offer, we'll put that offer out to the student for you. And I think it's important to know too that with our co-op program, we don't use a rounds, ranking, or a match system. We operate on a first come, first serve basis. And what that means is as offers come in for students, we present those offers to the student, and then they have 2 business days to decide if they are going to take the position. So you don't have to wait very long to find out if they've accepted your job offer. So in terms of a supervisor's responsibilities, when you have a student working with you, the student is required to set 3 learning objectives, but they do that in conjunction with you, really to make sure that it's feasible within the scope of the position. So they're responsible for creating them, they review them with you, and then they submit them to the co-op office. At about the halfway mark of the co-op work term, myself or one of my colleagues would either do an in-person visit if we're past the COVID thing. If not, it would be a phone call or a video conference. I've done a lot of Zoom meetings this summer. Let's see, 66 to be exact for co-op worksite visits. Toward the end of the term, there's a 1-page performance evaluation, which includes a shared assessment of the learning objective completion. You also are asked to review the student's co-op work report or presentation, and you're not reviewing it for editing purposes, spelling and grammar. You're really looking at it to make sure that there's nothing confidential or inaccurate in it, that it's a good representation of what the student did while they were with you. And also you're asked to provide ongoing feedback and support to the student, much like you would do to any other employee with your organization. So many times employers will say, well, I'd like to have a student, but I don't know if it's a good time or a good fit. So when is a co-op student a good option? If you're looking at expanding your business, if urgent tasks are not getting done, if you find that your senior staff are spending time performing entry-level tasks, if you have people on leave of absence, If you're implementing new computer technologies and you're having difficulty with getting that to work, if there seems to be a lack of qualified candidates for full-time positions, if you find yourself hiring too many freelancers or consultants, if you have certain busy periods where you do require temporary staff, or if you feel that your organization would benefit from a more youthful perspective. So benefits of hiring an Acadia Co-op student is we offer you senior students. So students will have either completed, second year, third year, or be in their fourth year of study. So they have up-to-date knowledge and skills with a minimum B- average. Their degree is directly relevant to your projects. As you may recall from a few slides ago, the position has to be related to the student's field of study. Co-op students are highly motivated. They self-select to be part of the co-op program. It's not mandatory. It's an option that they choose when they, at the beginning of the second year of their degree. They're making a personal investment because typically it does take them longer to complete their degree. So they are very motivated. Acadia, of course, is a very close location, and we have many students who want to work locally. Sometimes the perception is, well, all the students want to go to the big cities. They want to go to Halifax or Calgary or Toronto. That is not the case. Many of our students want to be in the local area. And co-op also gives you a chance of finding your future full-time employees or contract employees even. Also, we are here to help you and provide you with guidance and support throughout the co-op work term. I mentioned before, there's a quick response to offers. The work term lengths are flexible and there's year-round availability. You can hire for the summer and keep for the fall, or hire for the winter and keep for the summer. It's a very reasonable cost. You heard Tim and Margaret talking about the funding incentives that they offer. It makes it much more affordable to hire a co-op student. And some of the other federal funding incentives that are available, the other SWPP programs, BioTalent Canada, Eco Canada, Venture for Canada, Magnet, ITAC, and of course, Tim talked about ICTC. There's Green Spaces, there's Canada Summer Jobs, Young Canada Works, there's MyTax, there's NSERC. And then on a provincial level, Margaret talked about the cooperative education incentive. She mentioned about the student summer skills, the co-op and the regular stream, and then the Nova Scotia Energy Training Program. So all of these different programs have certain requirements for them. And if you go onto our co-op webpage, there's a section on there for funding for employers, and it very clearly outlines what the requirements are for you to get the funding that's available. So if you're looking for further information, you can certainly email me, shelley.mcmullen@acadiau.ca. I am specifically responsible for the computer science co-op program, as well as business, with the exception of finance and accounting, which my colleague Matthew Balser coordinates. And our website address is on there for your convenience. So thank you so much.
And if folks have questions, feel free to chime in or write them in the chat, and we can answer them.
So we had a couple questions in there that I think Margaret covered them all. Melanie and James, did you have any follow-up to any of those? Or Barry?
Good point from Joanne. She has to digest all the information before coming up with relevant questions.
Absolutely, and reach out to us afterwards if you do have questions. There are a couple of clarifications I could make, and Shelley did a great job of explaining back-to-back work terms are possible, and certainly back-to-back work terms are fundable by ICTC as well. And our application process is quick and easy. In terms of timeline for us, we've got a lot of flexibility. In fact, I often tell people that we're on a Thursday today, and if you decided that you wanted to bring somebody into your workplace on Monday, or I guess it would be Tuesday because of the holiday, then we can actually turn that around very quickly. And so because of COVID, we understand that sometimes circumstances demand quick action. And so even though I mentioned in the process that there is ultimately a contract that needs to be signed, provided that all the eligibility requirements are met, we can start the application today. The student could technically start tomorrow, and then we can get the contract put in place over the next few days. So we're very flexible from that perspective. And we don't have even though we do work on the sort of co-op window, we are able to accept applications pretty much during the whole of the co-op term. So, you know, if come October you realize that, oh gosh, I've got a need for someone, then we could actually provide you funding for that. And if they were a co-op student, then of course they would have to meet the co-op requirements. But if it was a non-co-op student in the regular stream, as Shelly mentioned, then we're able to fund those students for quite short work terms as well. We just need to make sure that it's a meaningful work integrated learning experience that's relevant to the digital economy.
And Taylor, will we be able to send all of the slides out to participants afterwards if we share them?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll send all 3 of those presentations out, which also have the contact information, but I think everyone has sort of put their email in that chat as well if you're looking to reach out to anyone one-on-one.
Awesome. And one other clarification I'll make about the graduate hiring programs. With Graduate to Opportunity, you do have to be approved for the funding before the grad starts full-time work for you, full-time permanent work. So maybe you had them there on an internship, that's fine, as long as their position wasn't permanent. Then yeah, you have to be approved for our funding before they start permanently. But our turnaround time is only 5 days, so or less. We can do it very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And Taylor, I did see one question that came in early on. So just to make sure everybody understands that we're definitely open to stacking with provincial and other non-federal programs, but we're not able to combine our funding stream with any other federal program. So if there was a COA money that was coming in, or Venture for Canada, for example, we wouldn't be able to combine our funding stream directly with another funding stream for that employee. Well, that's great. Apparently we did such an awesome job of explaining everything. But I really hope that people will take advantage of both the provincial program and the ICTC program as well. I was really happy to see us being able to bring in 20 odd placements this summer, which is fantastic. And that's money that wouldn't normally have come into the region if employers hadn't done that. And, you know, I'd like to see 2 times, 3 times, 10 times as much if we can make that work. And each one of those placements brings a good amount of federal money to the table. And that's really the goal. My goal is to bring that into Nova Scotia, into Atlantic Canada, and ideally into the Valley region as well, and help employers and not-for-profits to grow their businesses.
Great. Okay. Looks like not too many questions coming through. So yeah, those slides will be sent around to everybody who's attended, or people who weren't able to attend who registered for the session. Those will come through. But yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to Tim or Margaret or Shelley if you do come up with some questions later on or are looking for some more information.
Absolutely. And Taylor, thank you so much for the Rural Economic Network, the Valley Wrens, for organizing and hosting this event. We really appreciate it. And it's great to be able to reach out to so many, I guess, Valley businesses as well as Nova Scotia businesses.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.